Hey writers, welcome back to the Write in the Head podcast with me, John Paul Sperling. I'm a screenwriter and a life coach. So this podcast is where we bring those two worlds together, talking about the mindset required to turn that passionate pursuit of writing into a thriving career. Coming up on today's episode. Ethan Cvitanic has served as a script reader, a coordinator, a writer, and a director. More recently, Ethan founded a premium screenwriting consultancy, Hollywood Script Coach. Ethan and I get into one of the foundational questions of screenwriting: how to actually enjoy being a screenwriter. Ethan Cvitanic, welcome to the Write in the Head podcast. Very glad that we're getting to connect today. We are here to talk about how to enjoy being a screenwriter. My first question is, why is that what came to mind when we were talking about what we could possibly discuss today? Why is this important?
Because of writing for 10 years, it's become my personal mantra. Like, if I'm not enjoying myself, I don't want to do it, but also I take it as a sign that like something's not right. Like I feel like, especially I like to write comedy. And so, really just having a good time. I usually write with a partner, if we're laughing, if we're enjoying ourselves, like I take that as a sign that we're on the right page, and I follow that instinct. And I wish that I followed that instinct like right from the beginning. So I like to preach that as much as I can.
Yeah, it's so important. And I haven't been writing as long as you have. Just from experience in life, though, it's taught me a lot about the importance of having fun and enjoying what we're doing. And it's from so many different perspectives. I think about this a lot. I think about the longevity of it. I mean, staying in the game long enough, which is, I think, one of the most important things about being a screenwriter, is kind of setting yourself up to be able to do this for a long time, because it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Very hard to do that if you're not happy while you're doing it. And even in terms of creativity, neurologically speaking, you've got more going on in the brain when you're calm, when you're feeling playful, when you're feeling happy compared to, neutral or stress. That's probably the worst state of mind you could be in. So, yeah, it's such an important subject. Why do you think that writers can sometimes struggle with this? Because it can sometimes feel like a bit like a daily grind rather than a passionate pursuit. How do we get ourselves into that mindset?
How do we get ourselves into that? I think maybe sometimes we have good ideas that we know are good ideas, that people tell us are good ideas, and then we start going down that path of, okay, what is the whole story? Let me structure it out. Maybe I'll start writing some scenes, even if it's not what actually excites us. And I think that like, you just have to go with what excites you. I mean, writing is hard in general, like it's not the easiest thing. It is an intellectual exercise. You have to push yourself to think of things in new ways every time you sit down. So, you don't want to add any more strain to that exercise. And I think that yeah, we just get caught up in like an idea that we think, oh, this is a great idea, or like someone told me this is a great idea, so this is my best idea, and therefore like I should kind of shelve anything else that didn't get as warm of a reception from that one sentence, like, pitch, or, just kind of casually bringing it up to like a friend. But the truth is, there's just whatever you're most passionate about, and then there's everything else, and you have to have that, that fire, that excitement, to come and sit down every day. And I know for me, like, I just want to be excited every day. Like, and I only work on the things, like, that's why sometimes like I'll be writing on one thing, and then, all of a sudden I wake up one day and I'm thinking about a different project, and I'm like, okay, well, I have to go start on the other one now, because it's just what's calling me, yeah.
Yeah, you feel that urge to go and do the thing that lights you up. There's a spark for it. I get that feeling quite a lot. Sometimes I have to pause and wonder whether that's just me moving too quickly between projects. I have a thing about being bored with a project, probably prematurely,
Yeah.
but that's separate subject. Something you were saying there, it triggered this question in me. You've been writing 10 years. Clearly, writing what you love is very important to you. What's been the biggest sort of impediment to enjoying screenwriting that you personally have experienced over that time period? We will get back to the chat in just a moment. Firstly, if you're enjoying today's episode, please do go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That's a great zero-cost way of supporting the Right in the Head mission. It takes you about 2 seconds to click that button. If you want to go the extra mile, write us a comment as well. That will tickle the fancy of the YouTube algorithm, meaning this content shows up for more screenwriters just like me and you. Thank you so much. Back to the chat.
This is a really unpopular answer.
I love those.
Going into it with starting out with an idea, trying to figure out the whole thing before you even start on it. I think that a lot of people, I say this, I go both ways. There are a lot of people that are proponents of, starting with a very firm structure and kind of like beating out every single scene. And for me, a lot of the joy comes from just writing the scenes and like doing a first draft almost just to get familiar with the characters and kind of figure out the dynamics between the different characters and kind of the tone that you really want, and then go back and kind of like restructure it. But I know a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of people would say, oh, it's a waste of time. And I would get down on myself, if I had written a first draft that I thought was good, even if I knew it wasn't like great. And then someone would come in and say, oh, but this is actually should have happened 30 pages ago, or like, I don't think this ending matches the beginning. So people come at you and they start criticizing you. But I think that writing that first vomit draft is such a fun part of the experience. It's like kind of the most pure part because it's just like pouring out of you. And I think that people should do that kind of just to start. I mean, maybe don't like submit that to a competition or something, but get it out the way that you're feeling it and then go back and like play around with it and like, be a surgeon to your own, body of work. And but just start with the instinct and like just run, like, because I think sometimes we get excited and then it's like, okay, let's break out the spreadsheet, and start like punching things in. And it's like that to me, I didn't get into writing to do that. That almost makes it like a formula. I wanna like, discover it live.
It reminds me of, weirdly enough, I used to have a singing coach, and she shared this with me once, that the best way to get good at singing is to sound really bad to start with, because at least you're going for it. She said that a lot of people want to sort of paint this incredible portrait. She encourages people to start with just finger painting, just throw some paint on the canvas, mess around. That was how she described her singing teaching technique. Just play with it, just have fun. It will sound terrible, but
Yeah.
getting all the terrible out means it's really kind of fun, and you lose your sense of embarrassment, and then you can start to refine that, and you end up with a great singing voice. I didn't. Just spoiler alert. It's just, her technique was great. I just was not consistent. So I still can't sing, but I loved the lesson I took from that, and I do think it applies to screenwriting. I think the first draft, like you said, it's the vomit draft. I call it the poop draft. It's just, can I get this thing kind of roughly beginning, middle, end-ish? And I write comedy too, so it's, can I throw in a few jokes that just kind of come to me in the moment?
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's when I'm having the most fun. I'm laughing out
Right.
loud at the ridiculousness of what I'm putting onto these pages. And then it's the rounds of notes and feedback, and gradually it changes. But I think if you start with that stream of consciousness, it always has that kind of essence to it. I'm wondering if you have sort of ever come across talk among the other writers that you're friendly with, that you're associates with, about this being a tough industry. I think that's what comes to mind when I think of why some writers are not particularly enjoying what they do. No doubt it's a tough industry.
Yeah. I think
I
because we, oh, go ahead. Sorry, finish the
no,
question.
it's going to say you know what? I'm going to pause because I was about to say my opinion of the tough industry. I would like to hear yours first.
Okay. I think it starts with just, you know, everyone tells you before and once you're in it, oh, this is so competitive. It's so tough. You have to be the best. You know, you have to be better than the people that are already doing it at a professional level to break in. You know, people will just give you this, like, you know, they just like hand you this ball of anxiety and they're like, okay, now go right, you know? And it's like, thanks a lot. Like, fuck, you know? And so, you know, you come into this being really hard on yourself because you know you're like, I have to be the best, you know? And I get that sometimes I write something that I think is great, and then I come back the next day and I'm like, why did I think that was great? Like, how stupid am I? I don't even know what good writing is. Like, I'm an idiot, you know? And you're criticizing yourself because you're trying to imagine what some agent or manager or producer is thinking reading this cold, you know? And I think that we just internalize like the worst critic that we can imagine, or like the person who wants to read our work the least. And we like take this fictional person and we like integrate them into our, you know, brain and into our writing process. And I think it's so harmful. And I say this because I'm speaking from experience. I've done this to myself for so long, you know, like, and the truth is, yeah, like a lot of people in the industry probably will read your stuff and not like it, but so they felt the same way about so many of the things that we love that have gone on to become classics, you know, like I'm struggling right now to think of them, but like think about all the movies and scripts that got turned down by like 5, 10, 20 people for years and years, and they ended up becoming like the best movie of the year, you know, and winning an award or making a lot of money, and people love it. And I think that you have to remember that it's like, actually, I don't need everyone in Hollywood to like this. I only need like a few people, and um, and they're gonna like it because it's like from me. And so what I need to do is really just get as much me in it as possible, because you know there's so many writers I love, like Aaron Sorkin, for example. I was talking about it with a friend yesterday, but I would never even dare to try and write something in the voice of Aaron Sorkin, because it's like, why bother? Like I'm not that smart, I'm not that witty, I'm not like, you know, I don't know enough about any of the like worlds that he writes about. So it's like I'm not competing with Aaron Sorkin because I'm not like Aaron Sorkin. I'm competing really just like with myself. And maybe there's some writers out there who are like me, but you know, even then we are different, and I need to focus on what makes me different and how I can just bring that to the surface as much as possible. And but to your point about it, like the part where it conflicts with the industry, I think yeah, we're just so we just are so self-critical because not we're trying to like protect against that moment where we do send it out, you know, and then we get back rejection or criticism. And the truth is, you honestly cannot safeguard against that. Like I've sent my stuff out to so many people, and some of the reception is good and some of it is bad. And you never know what it's going to be, and you can never really predict what it's going to be. And so, like, you know, just take that like pressure off of yourself. You know, you
Yeah,
can't.
you can never guarantee that somebody is going to love your work, but what you can guarantee, to your point, is that you love your work because you put you into your work. And
Yeah,
that's one way that I've discovered to really be proud of what I write is to be able to read it back and think, might sound a bit arrogant when I say this, no one else could have written that. I don't mean because it's amazing. I mean because it's me.
yes,
And I'm the only me. So Aaron Sorkin could not have written what I just wrote because he can't pull from
exactly.
the same memories and experiences that I can. And to your other point about not writing in the voice of Sorkin, Whole thing about, so I sort of have a background in marketing, and so I do a lot of this thinking through that heuristic sort of product evaluation. If you're going to create a product that mimics an existing product, it needs to be 10 times better because people have product loyalty. If they
Yeah.
want something similar to what is already on the market, they'll just use what's already on the market. So if you're trying to write in the voice of another writer, that writer already exists. Why would anybody choose you who's trying to be that good when they have the actual, in this case, Aaron Sorkin? So
Yeah.
it's a nonsense way of going about things. I think it's all about finding your voice, and that's in some ways that does help to feel like this industry. Yes, it's challenging, but if you are finding your voice and putting your work out there, there's ways that you can almost guarantee that you'll have a good time with it because you're proud of what you're doing.
And, sorry to interrupt, but like if you are going to be rejected or criticized, at least it's for something that like you believe in, that like you put your heart in. So I can't think of anything worse than trying to mimic something else and then that not working out, because it's like, man, I didn't even get to do what I know I can do, or like what I really want to do. It's you lose doubly, I feel like.
Yeah, is that the quote from Jim Carrey, I think it is. He said, "You can fail doing what you don't like, so you may as well take a shot on something you love."
Exactly.
And I've had that experience doing a lot of different jobs as I was growing up through my 20s and 30s, and choosing some jobs because they just felt like they were a bit more secure. And so maybe that's what I should do, even though I'm not happy. And then when those jobs go wrong, which they do, it's that feeling of, well, now I've failed at something I wasn't happy doing anyway. So that's kind of like a double blow, as you were just
Yeah.
saying. What do you think, switching up the conversation flow a bit here, what do we think about isolation and how that could play into struggling with being a writer sometimes? This is something I think about a lot, especially in the last few years with the pandemic and everything else that's been going on. I do think it's a conversation that needs to be had around that screenwriter and happiness area because isolation could be a big contributor here.
Yeah. I go back and forth because I mean, every human being, whether you're a writer or not, we all do this. So it's sometimes it's hard to know whether it's self-inflicted or just part of the natural human mind, if I'm feeling down or if I'm feeling really good. Um, I've done some really great work under isolation. In fact, like a week and a half ago, I was kind of forced. I was like recovering from like a small surgery, and I was just kind of forced to sit in my apartment. And I know I didn't really feel like having people over, obviously. And so it was kind of became like just a really protected writing time. And I did some really great work. But, you know, was I happy? Was I as happy as I am when I'm hanging out with people and, or working with other people? No. So I think that if you really want to be happy, I think you have to find a balance. And maybe if your process is that you write alone, like you devote 3 hours a day to just being totally isolated, or maybe four, or five if you only do it one day a week. Um, and then the rest of the time you're at work with people or you're hanging out with people doing fun stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with being alone, but intentional self-isolation and to like serve your creative you know fuel, I don't know that it necessarily works. I'm not convinced either way that it helps or hinders. I know that for me personally, I just have a better time working with people. And so I've kind of just decided to go in that area. And I know so many other writers that don't have writing partners, or they don't have a writing group that they meet with. And I always try and encourage them. I'm like, do it, because I didn't do it. I was always alone in my room, shut the door, turn my phone off, like just, and then COVID hit and it kind of lost. It's like having all the time to do that made it not special or anything anymore. And it was like a switch flip. I was like, no, I don't want to do this alone anymore. I feel like an island. And
Mm, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a term from the life coachy personal development area called monk mode. Have you heard of going into monk mode?
I can imagine what it is, but I haven't heard
Yeah.
that term.
Well, you basically just described it. It is, I am going to shut myself away from external distractions for a prolonged period of time. So, no parties, not much socializing at all, lots of hard work, either in a career sense or just work on myself. Read a ton of books, listen to podcasts, and just figure everything out. And the issue with that is that people kind of get addicted to that mode of living to the point where it becomes the goal itself, is just to stay in, learn. And the challenge is integrating what you've learned back into living a more, what we might call a more normal life.
Yeah.
And what you said there about spending time alone in your room, turn your phone off, get the writing done, I'm a big fan of that for certain periods of time. And then it's about spreading that work and meeting other writers and building your network. Those two things have to work in alignment with each other. That's what I have found to be one of the secrets to my levels of happiness that have been, fairly sustained since I started this whole journey as a writer.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I feel like you have to have that balance, and also because there's going to come times when you do face the rejection, or you come to a point on a project where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, like I'm so lost. And then you really need that network of friends to kind of like just make you feel like you have something else too. You're not just a man alone in your room like hunched over a laptop. Like, you have a life, and you have like connection, and you know fun. And I think that um you can't underestimate the value of that. And it can be hard to maintain sometimes, especially like when you have friends that are writers also, because our periods of self-isolation have to like overlap, because then we have to be free at the same time to like go out and do something. But it's also like, just go, like you can always, if you really get a great idea or you feel inspired, go in the bathroom for 5 minutes, write that crappy version of a scene, and then go back out and enjoy the rest of the night, like.
This is what you do at parties, is it? You just sneak off to the bathroom, jot
Sometimes
down
it
a quick
comes in
scene.
at random times, yeah, or you hear something funny. I mean, I don't know if other people do this as well, but if I hear something really funny, sometimes I'll just write it in my phone, because I'm like,
Hmm.
I could never come up with something that good.
Yeah,
And
I've done that.
I,
Yep.
yeah, so
Where's
it's,
Ethan? Oh, he went to the bathroom again. He's got
I know
just
my friends are probably like, that's why you go to the bathroom all the time. No, I try not to, but
well, that's probably one of the best things that they could assume you're doing in there. If you're taking regular trips to a bathroom at a party, there's a lot worse things they could assume that you're doing.
they're
The
off doing their own, activities
Yes,
usually. So
much worse than writing down a simple scene, hopefully. So I want to ask you about feedback, because this is another thing that I have found can threaten your level of happiness as a writer. And I think there's a very specific reason for this, which is that when you send a script in, be it to a producer, developer, your agent, whoever, they don't have a lot of time to write down everything about the script that they did like. So the majority of the feedback is going to be constructive. And if you are of a certain mindset or in a certain mood that day, that can start to feel very negative, right? Because all they're sending back is this needs to change, this could be better, punch up this joke. And they don't send all the bits like, oh, I actually really like most of this. So you kind of get this warped perception of how good you are as a writer. Firstly, have you had that experience? And if you have, what have you done to kind of buffer yourself, build up the psychological immune system against such things?
Oh man, I'm still trying to figure that out. I think because my friend and I have taken this, wholeheartedly. It's like, okay, if this person is even bothering to read your whole script, like you have to take that as on its own as a huge compliment because people that are busy, people that actually work in the industry don't have like time, a lot of time, and they usually don't want to be spending it reading like the input script that they've received that week. So just be grateful for the opportunity, be grateful that they actually finished it. And then this is a big thing that I give to writers that I work with, and I tell anyone, I say you can usually tell how much someone liked a script by how specific the notes are. Um, if the notes are really, really broad, like I think Act Two could use a lot of work, like that's like a scary note. When I get that, I'm like, oh no, or they're like, I wonder what the story would be like without this main character. You're like, wait, what? But if they're telling you, oh, I think that in that one scene, Johnny just I couldn't I didn't like the way he like talked to his friend or something like that. Like that's actually a great note because that means they understand who Johnny is. They understand his relationship with this person and they understand like what the story's flow and kind of like what needs to happen to get to the next scene. So I try and like read between the lines when I'm getting feedback to determine like how much they actually liked it. And beyond that, like, I guess your question was, how do you handle getting negative feedback? Or,
It's I tend not to think of it as negative anymore, and that's because of the reasons you just cited, which is that
yeah,
if they're reading your script at all, it's a good sign. And I think of it now in terms of content versus concept. If their feedback is about the concept, that's problematic. If
oh
it's
yeah,
about the content, as in a line of dialogue or an action line, then like you were saying, that's actually quite a good sign because they understand the script. They're just saying maybe change this tiny piece here or there.
yeah.
So I agree with everything that you just said. It's still the case though that most of the feedback you get back will be to change something, and that can start to play on your mind a bit about, am I
Oh
actually
yeah.
good at this? Or because everyone keeps telling me to change things. I've never written a script and just got feedback like, this is perfect, don't touch anything. So what kind of safety mechanisms, if you like, do you have in place just to stop you going down to that kind of dark place where you start doubting yourself?
Well, sometimes I got some rough feedback last week, and one of the things is I won't even read it all at once. I'll read like, a paragraph, or I'll look at the first few pages of notes that they wrote directly on the script. I won't even go into it at all at once because all at once is can be so overwhelming, especially if it's a feature. I mean, but if really for anything, um, I'll just kind of glance, like I'll take it literally in bites, and then I'll come back and I'll look at a little bit more. I'll like chew on that because if you're trying to absorb all of this feedback all at once, like of course the message, the greater message you're gonna take in is just like I suck, or look at all the things I did wrong. I must not know how to do this. And that's not true. And the reason that's not true is it's so hard. It is so unbelievably hard to write something that is just great, that just doesn't need, think about how many times in your life have you read a script that you're like, no notes or like one note, it's like, it, I would say I don't know if I ever have, I think that we look at movies and we believe, that they are perfect in some cases, but those scripts did not start out perfect. Like I'll even remember like one of my favorite movies is Mean Girls, and I went and I dug up a script of Mean Girls, and it wasn't I don't know if it was like the final script, but it was like the one right before the final one. It was like a month before they started shooting. I did some research and it was not what the movie was. There's a lot of things that were different, like tonally it was similar, but so many lines were different, and interactions, and a lot of things were missing that like make the movie so iconic. And so it's like you have to realize, like, when it gets to the point of being a movie, so many people have contributed and like honed it and made it better and more specific and like all these things. So first off, don't compare your script to movies. Don't do that. Second, know that scripts for movies were really like just in a lot of cases templates, for how to make that movie. And you're it's just like no one hits a perfect home run, period. I just don't believe that people do. Even when people say, oh, I wrote this on my own. I mean, maybe this makes me sound paranoid, but I usually am hesitant to believe them, because I'm like, I know, even when I say I wrote something on my own, I have like 4 or 5 friends that I pretty much run everything by, and they give me very detailed feedback, or we'll talk on the phone through a problem, or, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm always getting help, and it's always getting better. And I kind of forgot what the question was. Sorry.
We were no, the answer was great. We were talking about how you deal with the fact that most feedback will be constructive, not just out and out positive. And you made the really good point that there are no perfect scripts and very few perfect movies, and even perfect movies is down to the perception of the person watching the movie. So
Exactly.
I happen to think that Back to the Future is close to being a perfect movie. Weirdly, I feel the same about Avengers Endgame, but there's a couple of scenes in that movie that I would change. So
Yeah.
I just lost half my fans by saying that. I don't have fan. I don't have fans. I don't know where fans came from. I meant subscribers. Now I just lost the other half for using that word. But the other thing to throw into that conversation is you brought this to mind as you were talking. When you send a script and ask for feedback, the person that you're sending it to usually feels an obligation to contribute something. So if they just wrote back, oh, this is perfect, then they haven't really contributed. And if that's your manager, your agent, somebody in the business, they're going to feel like, no, 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 I need to point out something because otherwise I'm not doing my job. A friend of mine who's a writer once said that with every script she submits, she leaves a couple of things in there that she knows is not great because they'll just choose those things to change and they'll leave the rest of it alone.
No kidding. I never thought of that. Oh my
Yeah, I
God.
thought that was brilliant. So might be doing that from now on. So what are the other things about the industry that can potentially hamper people's happiness? And again, I'm speaking just from personal experience. You might not experience this, but it's difficult to map progress. I just did a whole episode about this with Alex Knight, actually, the person who introduced us.
Yeah.
It's difficult to map progress in this industry. It's difficult to know whether you're moving towards your goals, because it seems like, to quote another person who has been on this podcast, Nick Roth, he said it's like trying to hit a moving target, but it takes 6 months to reload your gun. And that really struck me as truth because it takes so long to write a script, then you send it out, doesn't quite work, now you have to write the next one. Do you have that experience? Have you felt that kind of, I don't know where I am, I don't know if I'm getting better? And if you have felt that, how do you deal with that?
Well, I'll say maybe I'm like a different breed of writers. I'm very arrogant, and I feel like I'm always getting better. And I say that because I'll always write something, and then sometimes I'll put it down for a year. Sometimes I'll put it down for 2 years, and or I'll be writing the newer draft of it, but I'll go, you know what? I feel like this was better in the last draft. And I'll go back and I'll look at the last one or 2 drafts before. And I'm like, oh, it definitely was not. I've never looked back, maybe once in like 10 years of writing, have I looked back at a previous draft and been like, oh, I think this was stronger. I think I had it right the first time. I feel like my drafts are always getting better. um, ability to get straight to the point is always getting better because that's, screenwriting is all about efficiency. And so it's like, how can you say more with less? And I feel like I'm always getting better at that. Um, how do I map progress as a career versus progress as a writer are two completely different things, because um,
Mm, very good
I,
point. Very good point.
I, am always confident that I'm improving because I work at it almost every day and I really put my all into it. But progress as a career, I think that's just impossible to chart or map. I mean, um, because sometimes it's like, okay, well, if this person agrees to read this, or if X production company wants to see a pitch deck I made, like it's like, is them just wanting to see it progress? I mean, yes, because they were wanting to see the last project I made or like I wrote, but by that token, it's like, well, if it doesn't produce a tangible result, is it still progress? I argue, yes. I believe everything is a win, every meeting, every conversation, etc. But I think that's just like a very weird game to start playing with yourself, and it's not the right one. I feel like as writers and who's in living in LA, as you are too, we get so caught up in like the business aspect. Am I playing the business side the right way? Because we have to do both. But it's like, and maybe this isn't why haven't been more successful, but I'm always trying to focus more on the writing itself because I'm like, at the end of the day, like no matter how many connections you have, if you don't have something to give them that's like ready to go, what is the purpose? What's the purpose of being in this room, getting this meeting, et cetera, if you don't have something that is as close to bulletproof as you can make it.
Yeah, really good point about progress as a writer versus progress in the industry. I've certainly, in the episode I did with Alex, I laid out how I map progress, but it was all about progress as a writer. It was about who I want to be as a writer and how many pages I'm writing. And, those are the sort of metrics you can track. So
Yeah.
I do like to use those. But you bring up a wonderful point about progress within the industry itself. And it's so funny you mentioned, well, this time they wanted to at least take a look at the materials. I do the same thing. I just recently had an email from a producer I've been working with. I wrote a Christmas movie, Christmas rom-com, and she was able to share it with, I think I'm allowed to say who she shared it with. They passed on it anyway, but so she shared it with Disney, and we just heard back yesterday, I think it was, and the feedback was, I finally got around to reading the script. It's very charming. It's not quite right for us. It doesn't quite fit our mandate. And I read that and I thought, well, that's a win. They read the script and they thought it was charming. That's great.
Yeah. Out of all the
Um,
things that you'd want, that's a pretty high compliment, I think.
from Disney, I'll take
Yeah.
it. I'll take it. Yeah. So mapping progress in the industry, it is kind of a foolish game because it's so nebulous. I think the way to go about that, and maybe I'm in the same camp as you, maybe I'm arrogant. I just choose to read things, to interpret things a certain way. So that mindset is what is going to eventually move me towards the goals that I have. If I read things as negative, if I just spend too much time going to the dark place, then I'm really not going to progress much in career or as a
No.
writer. So I think it is kind of a way of choosing how to interpret certain pieces of feedback, obviously while remaining realistic. If everybody telling you your project isn't working, then maybe it's time to stop being as arrogant and go back and do some rewrites.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to ask you this as we sort of bring this part of the episode towards a close here. We've talked about some amazing things here in terms of screenwriting happiness. If there's a writer out there that's listening to this that's going through a bit of a down spell, a bit of a dark period, maybe because of the strikes, maybe because of the industry being tough right now, no one's buying anything, what would be sort of that number one thing that you would tell them to either do, like an action step or a mindset shift? What would really help to cheer them up at the moment?
Well, for me, it was writing. It was just writing something that I was like, I feel like a broken record. Writing something that I was so excited by that I had gotten actually. I had written a draft of this one screenplay, and it was just like a road trip comedy about a couple friends, and nothing had ever come of it. I think I'd done two drafts of it, and then I got to a place where I was so fed up with Hollywood and the pandemic and nothing happening. And I was like, I don't even think I enjoy writing anymore. And then like the urge to write came back as it always does, but I didn't immediately try and jump back into what I'd been writing for. I said, no, I'm going to write. I'm going to work on what actually excites me. Like, where do I want to disappear to? And it was this road trip with these friends. I think that was part of it, is like, after in the middle of kind of coronavirus, like, what do we want to do, is like go have fun, have an adventure. Um, and I just spent like 2 months writing it and having fun with it every day, and having the characters say ridiculous things, and not even thinking about, am I going to show this to anyone? Actually, I went in with the mentality, I'm never going to show this to anyone. This is for me. This is like some weird psychological exercise, like alternate reality, like, and I'm just like having this really fun time all alone by myself. And I enjoyed it so much. And that was the thing that got me back into like just being like, okay, no, I do love this. And and then I was lucky enough to meet a great writing partner right after that. But I just started writing something that I vowed never to show anyone. Um, just just to like have fun, And I think that that's so much of the time we're writing things and we're like, I hope so and so likes it, or I hope the X people respond to it this way, and I hope it'll get me attention because it's so splashy. And it's like, what about if it was just you? What if it was just you writing a movie and you were the only person that was ever going to see it, like, or read it? Like, what would you want to read, like, and that was the fun part for me, was like, I'm gonna write these like trashy characters who are like messy and drink too much and just sleep around. It was like, I really wanted to just, maybe that was also part of it. It was like, I wanted to, who do I want to like live vicariously through? And it was like these characters. And so I just went with it, and it was so much fun. And I feel like if you feel stuck in your writing, like, try that.
Yeah, I wrote down some notes when I thought of that question to ask you about what advice would you give. Honestly, I wrote down basically the same thing. I just wrote, I would first ask that writer who's going through a tough time, how many actual pages of writing are you doing at the moment? Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in even things that are adjacent to screenwriting. Like, I can spend a week working on a pitch deck, for example, and I'll start to feel a bit like, ugh, I kind of got away from marketing because I didn't want to do pitch decks and presentations. Or I could spend time in meetings, Zoom meetings, talking to producers and developers and all these wonderful people. I'm not actually writing. And the soul starts to get sucked from my body when I'm not actually writing. And so if I need
Yeah.
a quick fix, just open Final Draft. No sponsorship, by the way. I just happen to choose Final Draft. Every other platform is equally as good. I'm not promoting Final Draft. Maybe one day on this show. They have their own podcast, so it's unlikely. But open whatever you can, if it's a word processor, and just start typing, just start writing. And it doesn't even need to be a project you're currently working on. It could just be, I'm going to write 5 pages of nonsense today, just to re
Nonsense,
just to reconnect with it.
Yeah. And it could just be two people having a conversation. It doesn't even have to be like, this is the scene, and then I know this scene comes next. Like, just write two people talking to each other, It
Hmm.
like, break the rules, for yourself. And
I would start with interior living room day. A screenwriter attempts to write because he's feeling depressed. Start with that.
oh my God, yeah.
Go meta. Go meta on the whole thing. So
I think
I
that's
love
just adaptation. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is true. That idea has been done several times. I still
But
think
it's
it's a
so that's so good. I watch that one like every 2 or 3 years just because it hits so close to home. But
yeah, really does. The other one I love is I think it's just called is it just called Orange County?
oh my God, I love Orange County. Are you
It's a movie that
such
kind
a
of flew under
favorite
the
of my
radar.
family? Yeah, and like
It
no one knows about it. I'm always asking people. I know a girl from Orange County who had never seen Orange County. Blew my mind, and she was
it's
a writer.
such a great movie and it hits home every time I watch it. And not because I have a wild and crazy brother like Jack Black, one of his best roles, if you ask me. But
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is like the birth of Jack Black was
yeah,
that role. Yeah.
yeah, for me too. So this has been great. I think we've given listeners so much great information here about sort of maintaining and protecting that happiness as a screenwriter. What we're going to do now is kind of flip things around. This is a segment of the show called Question for a Coach. I still haven't created that jingle that needs to come up at that point. I've joked about that on every episode recently, still haven't got around to doing it. So this is when the guest on the podcast asks me a question that's sort of loosely connected to screenwriting, life coaching, anything from that wellness sort of area of the business. So, have you got your question?
Yes.
Go ahead and read that out.
Okay. Writing is a very we get it all out for lack of a better word, vomitous, experience sometimes. We put so much of ourselves into our work. How do you like fill yourself back up? I know it's a kind of an odd question, but like, what do you do to uh, just feel like yourself again and feel like a human being and not just like a conduit for ideas and characters and dialogue?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how to answer this in the most honest way, in a way that would also be useful, I think is the right word. Because honestly, the first thing that came to mind is that I chose writing, and maybe it's specific to comedy writing, because it gives me more energy than it takes away. It fills me up as in and of itself. I will go on and say more about the answer because about the subject, I should say, because I know that that's almost like sidestepping the question.
Yeah, you're leaving me hanging.
I know, but I had to lead with truth, and
No, no, no.
the truth is it fills me up. I love writing comedy. It makes me feel great. It puts me in a good mood. That's why I always write first thing in the morning because it just puts me in a great mood for the day. Having said that, there are some other things that came to mind. It's very fundamental, so it might not be exactly what you were looking for, but as a coach, as a former, personal trainer and fitness professional, I've always kind of had this belief in the fundamentals. So when it comes to how I'm feeling in general and my ability to go to work mode and then switch off and be in relaxed mode, a lot of that comes down to taking care of things like my sleep cycle, things like my nutrition, things like my exercise. So I have guidelines. Some of them are rules, but most of them are guidelines around these sort of fundamental areas of life. And I'm very good at sticking to them because they make my life better and healthier and more energetic. And I'm definitely not perfect with them. But so, for example, I make sure I'm sleeping. I'm typically in bed by 9, maybe 9:30. I'm the way I'm wired. I'm one of those people that goes to bed early, wakes up early. Everyone's
Oh, I'm
different. Everyone's
disaster.
different. And then I wake up naturally around 5:30, 5:45. I don't use my alarm. It's just what time I wake up. That means that I'm typically not feeling sleepy during the day. Now, that means that I don't have an over dependency on caffeine, which is good. I have maybe a cup of coffee in the morning, sometimes, not always. I look after my diet. I eat mainly whole unprocessed foods mainly. I'm not perfect. Exercise every day for at least half an hour, even if it's just going out for a walk. Typically, I'm in the gym as well. So it's kind of fundamentals, but what I have found over the years is if I'm going through a period of not feeling full, not feeling joyful, not feeling happiness is as simple, it's not quite the right word. If I'm not feeling like I'm on track, it's probably something to do with one of those fundamentals, or it's I'm going through a period of high stress. If it's a stress thing, I'm going to amplify things like my meditation, journaling, any of my mindfulness practices that I have. But I would even say those don't really work if my sleep is out, if I'm eating bad food, if I'm not exercising. So there's kind of these layers that I've built over the years. But specific to sort of switching off, what I've learned to do, because I wasn't very good at this for many years, is just understand where my limits are. So I would put this under the umbrella of self-awareness. So I now know that I've got about 4 hours of really good writing in me per day. And that's if I break it up. I can't do 4 hours at once. I can do 2 hours and then I need to take a break. And then if I have an afternoon or an evening where I'm not doing something else, I can do another 2 hours and they'll be fairly productive and fairly creative. If I try and push more hours than that in a day, it's not going to be my best work and I'm not going to enjoy it. So I stick to that. And most of the time, it's just the 2 hours in the morning. So I'm not pushing all the time because that leaves me exhausted and it's not even my best work. So being aware of what my limits are. I don't typically do any writing on Sundays. Sunday is just a complete day off for me, unless I've got a podcast episode that still needs editing because it's dropping on the Monday. Sometimes I find myself in that situation. But for the main part, I don't do any work on Sundays. So that's another big part of it is just self-awareness. And then the final thing I wrote down was just social connection. It's such a resource for me, and I'm not the best at taking advantage of it because I like to be in my monk mode doing the work. I pride myself on my work ethic, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if I am approaching a point where I start to feel a bit drained, a bit empty, I know I need to go and connect with other human beings. That is the first thing I need to go and do. So it could still be in a professional setting. It could be a networking event, but the biggest refill for me is see some friends, spend some time with family, just disappear and not even think about writing for a period of time. Those are the big things. There's probably 100 little things that I do, but those are the fundamentals of how I just keep in a good mindset and stay productive at the same time.
I love that. I accidentally and sometimes purposefully do a lot of that too, but it's good to hear that it works so well for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all sort of these biological machines, right? This is the way I think about it. So we all have a certain milieu taking place inside this extremely complex body and brain. So it's all chemicals, hormones. And if we treat that in a way that is nurturing and loving, then we will by and large be feeling quite good. Another thing I've become aware of actually on that subject is what genuinely fills me up and makes me feel good versus what makes me feel excited or what's pleasurable in the moment but actually doesn't fill me up. So doing a hard day's work actually makes me feel genuinely good. At the end of the day, if I go to bed and I'm feeling like I did everything I could today, that's great. A day on the couch, it feels nice, like just binge watching content, but I don't go to bed feeling that great. And if I go out with my friends and I have some cocktails, and that's so much fun in the moment, it's not great the next day. I think the day after a night out is when I feel the least fulfilled and content. I feel like garbage. So noticing what really truly does fill me up versus those sort of hedonic explorations, which I still do occasionally. I just tip the balance further towards those genuine sort of bucket fillers.
No, that's good.
I want to make sure I haven't left anything out here. I mean, connecting to something bigger than you, I think that's another part of it. And that could be, I don't know, for some people that's God or spirituality, or for some people, honestly, it's their dog. It could be
Mm,
anything, but just, again, because screenwriting can be quite a solo pursuit, I think just connecting to something other than yourself can be a really huge part of it.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot about working with writing partners. I'm assuming that's a big reason you do that. It just, in your words, it kind of fills you up, right?
Absolutely. I just love, you know, that feeling of collaboration and, you know, you come against a problem and then it's like solution, 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 the answer, you know? And that is such a exciting experience to just be in. And I love that. And, so it does fuel the sense of connection that we all crave at the same time as like, being artistic, being creative. It's like the best of both.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got very fond memories of being in a production office, working on shows that were just so collaborative, and there's the war room as it's called, and there's ideas up on the board and there's ideas flowing around and tons of coffee and snacks, and it's just that whole environment. I really miss it. I haven't done it recently. I really miss it. It's such a panacea for
Yeah.
almost everything that you could struggle with as a writer. Just put somebody in that sort of environment for a few days. It's going to be
So
beautiful.
good.
And I think that's
I
a
miss
great
it.
way to close the episode, Ethan. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time. This has been such a joyful conversation. I love talking about happiness and how we can get there and sustain it to a degree. Let's not pretend that we can just always be happy all the time. That's not the human experience, but we can do our best.
Yeah.
If people want to know more about you, follow you, where can they go, and how can they find out more about your coaching practice? We didn't even get to talk about that, but you have a very
Yeah.
healthy
So
screenwriting coaching practice
it's
that we
okay.
should.
It's a coaching business. There you go. It is called the Hollywood Script Coach. I have some videos on Instagram and TikTok, but if you want to actually talk to me, I do consultations that are free. And then if you want me to read your script, you could just book me on hollywoodscriptcoach.com.
For just $5,000.
It's very affordable. It's very affordable. Well, it's cheaper than a lot of other people, I'll say that.
We
And
will
I
link
and
that in the
really
description.
invest a lot into each project. So if you are someone struggling with a project, I might just be the answer.
I love that. I might just be the answer. That's the tagline on your website on the homepage with the
Yeah,
big
I'll add that tonight.
smiling picture of Ethan. Cool. We will link that in the description. Anything else? Do you want people to follow you on social media, anywhere that they can grab you? Do you have an Instagram? If you don't know it off the
Oh
top of your
man, I
head,
don't
I'll
have
just.
anything interesting enough to post. This conversation was the extent of all the practical advice I have for people. So
All right.
you're
All
welcome.
right. So they should just subscribe to my channel then.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just keep
Right.
watching you. That's it.
Perfect way to end the episode. All right, Ethan, thank you so much again for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me on, John. It was really nice to meet you and chat with you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Right in the Head podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You know you want to. It's a great zero-cost way to support the mission we are on here at Right in the Head to share wellness information with the screenwriting community. If you want to go ahead and leave us a comment as well, it will please the YouTube algorithm. Therefore, this content will get shown to more screenwriters around the world. Finally, go ahead and click on the videos being suggested up here, maybe down here, depends on the end plate, and we will see you there. Wow, this is awkward.